Welcome to Conversations with Deborah, a bi-coastal dialogue heard exclusively on malcolmpresents.com. Good morning, Deborah.
Hey, good afternoon, Malcolm.
Good afternoon. Excuse me. It's good morning.
That's
No,
right.
it's afternoon here also.
Oh, very good.
There's a 3-hour difference. I'm in Los Angeles and she's in South Carolina.
South Carolina. I've been here now for 6 years, a native Californian, also a news reporter, enjoyed working for National Public Radio and PBS and Cap Cities for a long period of time till I decided to get the heck out. Things were getting a little bit nuts even at that time. But here in South Carolina, we had big storms that came through. I know that in Texas and in the Midwest, unbelievable amounts of storm and wind and chill. Fortunately, we have the Gulf that pushes a lot of moisture and heat. So today we reached a high of about 61 degrees, which for January is pretty doggone good. There's only one slight problem now. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and the temperature is now plunging. When I say plunging, we're down to probably 40, about 39 degrees. So that's quite a change from 61 all the way down into the high 30s. So
it sounds like Facebook did yesterday.
Oh my Lord, did you see that? Well, you know what? You know what? It's very funny. All the financial pundits were talking about, cash flow and the capital assets and blah 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 blah. You know what it's come down to?
Yeah, tell me.
I hate to laugh. People are fed up. People are fed up of getting canceled. And the people who are on Facebook, I haven't been on Facebook now for a couple of weeks, I guess. We're tired. They've lost over 1 million subscribers and people are going elsewhere. I know I'm going to be going elsewhere. You get tired of having your comments, which are opinions, of course, labeled as hate speech. And people are sick of it. So they're losing people. And I think that this is going to be quite the exodus. As a result, I mean, did you realize that I don't know what the numbers were, but I think I've got them here.
They lost, I think, $280 billion.
Yeah, that's quite a bit. That's down 23%. That's a lot of money.
But you know something, which he's stuck in between a rock and a hard place, because if they don't do any censoring, they're getting the Congress on there that they're allowing people with hate speech to come on.
Well, I think that's really a very, very slippery slope. And as I've talked about it before, if there was Facebook back in the founding of our country, I know that the Boston Tea Party people would be accused of perverting hate speech, and it would be another January 6th insurrection and what have you.
The Boston Tea Party was doing insurrection.
No, I mean, they did not overthrow a government. It was a civil disobedience, an act of civil disobedience. It was not an insurrection. Yeah. An insurrection, you actually have to have the means, for example, the military or guns and what have you, to actually overturn the government. So even January 6th, my friend, was not an insurrection. They did not find the weapons that they needed to be able to take over Congress and put a gun up against everybody's head saying, you will now vote for Donald Trump.
What would happen if they killed Pence? Or they killed?
What would happen if they killed Pence?
Would that be an insurrection?
Well, what would happen if they killed Pelosi?
Would that be an insurrection? Anyone, any Congress?
You know what's interesting about this? You know what's very interesting about this? Did you realize that what surfaced finally, because they have not released any of the videos for some strange oddball reason, a single video did get out about 2 days ago. I saw it on Epic Times, which I thought was very interesting. And what it showed was you had Capitol Police opening up the large brass doors. Those brass doors are over 2,000 pounds apiece. You cannot open them from the outside. They have to be security locked with a code that the officer, you can see he inputted the code and then he opened up the doors. That's how these people got in. They were allowed inside.
Well, you know that's called? It's called a
It's
conspiracy.
inviting in the American public
No, no,
to
no,
see what's going on.
it's called a conspiracy. That someone had conspired with the guards to let to let those rioters in. But anyway, I didn't want to talk about that today. Uh, but we're talking about Facebook, because it wasn't it last year or a year and a half ago where they were getting on Zuckerberg for not monitoring the with things that got on Facebook, and that there was so misinformation.
Well,
That
they did
there.
allow a live stream of an individual, apparently a mentally challenged individual who was being beaten up by a gang of kids, and they were live streaming that. There's been numerous instances where they have live streamed a lot of that. I find that interesting that that is not stopped when in fact someone mentions the word like hydrochloroquine, which I can't even pronounce, that drug that they were saying was so horrible against COVID. And suddenly some of my Facebook buddies can't get onto Facebook any longer. So, I mean, I think that there is selective censorship here, which if they're truly a publisher, they there's something wrong here. I think the bottom line at this point right now is that people are now speaking with their mouses, and with their mouses they're going other places. And as a result, you're going to see a tremendous number of people leaving Facebook. I know I'm going to be one of them. I don't care to go through all of the crap. Pardon my language, but all of the crap. And I think people have had it. We're fed up. We're just fed up.
Well, I use Facebook a lot for my marketing the show.
Mhm.
And I mean, basically, I don't get, it's not really my chief source of information or news. Basically, it is to keep in touch with my relatives
Mhm.
all over the world.
Mhm.
I mean, that's my basic use of Facebook. I'll read an article and I'll take it from, see who it is. If it's nobody, or it's, that's that I know or of value to me, I won't pay attention to it. I'll see it, and I'll see something interesting article. I'll read it, and I'll say, I wonder if that's true or not. And if I don't find any things on the news or newspapers or TV, the major stations, I'll say, hey, that's a quack. I don't take everything on Facebook for face value.
So do you think that Facebook has the right to go ahead and say, gee, that article looks like it may be questionable, so we're going to go ahead and censor it?
Well,
Do you think that you should be prevented from reading that article?
I think that if it's censored, if somebody goes rants and says, I'm going to kill the president, he's a son of a bitch. But something that leads me to another thing. I was watching TV the other day. Well, I watch TV every day, but I was watching TV both. I was listening to Fox, to Tucker Carlson, and to Hannity. They are, you wonder what country they are from. I mean, they literally, Putin could be paying them.
All right. So what ticked you off about what Tucker said?
Well, they're talking about how brain dead our president is, and how he really is going into his senior moments, that he shouldn't be president, that they're ruining the country, and the country is doing everything wrong, both of them. But then again, the liberal press isn't doing that much better, because of the, CNN, they are spouting their opinions, and it's hard to watch either of them. I agree with CNN, by the way, most of the time, with an MSNBC, but
I'm so sorry. My condolences.
yeah, but I hate both of them, the way they approach the news. Oh, by the way, the thing I wanted to ask you, did you think that the president of CNN should have resigned over
I think so.
his affair?
I think it's time. I think he overdid his welcome. I think that the arbitrariness of CNN started to really collapse when you had Don Lemon talk about the Malaysian airplane that possibly could have been crashed because of aliens. It was at that point I really started to wrinkle my brow and think, what's happened here? What exactly is going on? I think that CNN has outworn its welcome. And I think people at this point now are beginning to realize, you realize that 90% of their audience has gone elsewhere, is gone.
Well,
I think you're
don't
going
know
to
if
you're going
it's
to see the same
90%.
situation happen with Facebook. Bottom line is that most people, most Americans are center, and they're slightly to the right, and they don't like to be talked down to. This is a very independent country. We're a very independent thinking, entrepreneurial. We don't like being told crap, and we've been getting crap from CNN, and we've been getting crap, unfortunately. And I use it, I'm sorry to use the word, because what it is basically it's lies. We've been lied to by so many different entities. And unfortunately, I get very, very tired of being lied to by this administration. I'm an independent. I tend towards being more conservative. And yet, I mean, I was astounded that when we have such an unbelievable rise in crime in such cities as the great New York City, unbelievable amounts of crime that are happening there. I don't understand why President Biden did not take the opportunity when he visited Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City. They spotlighted guns as though guns pull the trigger. No, it's called criminals. It's called criminals who decide to go ahead and then are released with no cash bail. And I understand they're all saying, well, they can't afford it, blah, blah, blah. Then if you can't afford to be arrested, why in God's name are you doing crimes? Why are people being beaten in the subway? Why are they being thrown in front of subway trains? Why is this? Why? Because they can do it. And the criminals are now more important than the victims.
Wait a minute, Deborah. You're
Well,
saying why they committed crimes if they can't afford bail? Now you're assuming that they're guilty of doing the crime.
Listen,
How about the
if
people?
someone has been arrested, they need to be, the general public needs to be protected from somebody who decides they want to go ahead and push an individual who happened to be Asian into the pathway of a train. That person died.
Wait a minute. First of all, I don't know whether that person who pushed of a homicide is put out without bail. But number two, how about the people who are arrested that are not guilty, who are poor, who can't afford the bail money, who spend months in jail?
I find it very interesting that since we have gone to no cash bail, that the city of New York is to a point where people, ordinary people like you and me, and we planned on having a vacation as soon as COVID was over. My husband and I were going to go up to New York City. We love New York City. We no longer will go up there. It is much too dangerous for normal, everyday people to be able even to stroll on the sidewalk, to go to Times Square, the oddball things that are happening. For example, the guy who decided to give a jacket to a homeless man who was cuddled in the corner in the cold. And what did the homeless man do? He attacked the individual. These folks need either mental help, they need to be taken off the streets so that average, normal, everyday people can go about their business.
And put where? You know who's responsible for letting all the well, not homeless, but the people who are mentally ill out?
Go ahead.
Ronald Reagan.
Well, that's a long time ago, sweetie pie. It's like blaming Trump for all of this. You can't blame them anymore. He's gone. He's dead.
Yeah, well, only shows that the inefficiency of government.
Well, let's get going on that.
I mean, we haven't. I mean, I'm talking about both sides. They do not have an immigration policy.
Well, no, there is an immigration policy. Open up the borders while in the meantime we send troops over to the Ukraine to defend their border, which I think is probably an honorable thing to do to help them defend against the 100,000 plus Russians. But we don't have any defense on our southern border. You realize, and this is another great topic, Malcolm, 2 million people who were non-citizens came across the border. Not only did they come across the border, but then they were transported by bus by taxi, and by airplane by our government to the interior of the United States.
The 2 million.
I'm not understanding.
Do me a favor, send me the statistics on that. Send
Oh,
me
I'd be glad to.
the articles on that.
I'd be glad to.
I'd appreciate that. What was I going to say?
We're talking about the inefficiency of government. And I think at this point right now that you're seeing it at this moment, and Facebook is a real good indicator of it, that average everyday people at this point have had it. We're fed up. And that's why you're seeing Facebook people leaving in droves.
Do you think?
Go ahead.
You think there should be a revolution?
A revolution of what?
A violent overthrow of the government.
Oh, for God's sakes. You know what? You can do it very, very simply. You
How?
simply leave Facebook and you let them go ahead and just sit in their own diapers. Because at this point right now, advertisers are saying, wait a minute, you lost over 1 million people. 1 million people have now left Facebook. Maybe we better rethink our advertising budget. No kidding, Sherlock. Reconsider it.
You know why you get pissed off at Facebook? You look up something in Facebook or even Google, and the next thing you know is your computer's filled with advertising for that thing that you researched.
Yep, that's true.
So
That's
it's
absolutely true.
not so much that they're printing garbage, is that they're selling their information to advertisers.
And they're very powerful. But I do contend, and this is one of the things that you and I have talked about it in terms of this program, the power that normal everyday people have, economic power, is tremendous. You don't need a violent revolution. What you need to have is consciousness. And you're starting to see that consciousness start to show in places like Facebook, when 1 million plus people, I think you'll probably see 2 million people this next month. People are leaving and they've had it. They're fed up. The situation with, for example, with COVID, with Omicron and all of this, with many of these school districts still pressing to have masks. And yet you see at the playoff game, which was fascinating. It was great to see seeing the Rams and the football thing was great. But what was interesting about it was no masks. We didn't see masks last Sunday, and the Sunday and Saturday before that with the playoff games, we saw no masks. And my question comes now, where is the spike that Dr. Fauci talked about in terms of Omicron and Delta variant increase? You don't see it. It's gone.
First of all, the Omicron, they didn't necessarily predict a spike. There had been a spike, but they say that it's much milder than the other forms. Hopefully it is. As I say, everything that we talk about or they talk about is based on information that they don't have, but they're recording. So as they get the new information, everything changes. Because they said a year ago this was so. If they've been proven wrong, it's not that they were wrong, it's that they didn't have the information. So it should be updated and proved. So if we don't need masks, and that's what they're doing in schools.
Well, the problem that we have at this point right now is the whole thing, according to a Johns Hopkins study, which of course is just completely blowing up the internet, that Johns Hopkins looked at 24 various studies that had taken place from the beginnings of the COVID pandemic to now. And those studies were looking at what was the common sense, what was the impact of doing total lockdowns, what was the impact of masks, all of these various things that we did. And they came up with the idea, and all these 24 various tests came up and said, because we locked down, we were able to save 0.2% in terms of mortality. It hurt more than it helped. And that was basically what was being said about 6 months after we did the initial lockdown. And yet when people were trying to open things back up again, they were met with, nope, you'll have fines. It was, for example, there were fines for a New Jersey gym totaling over $200,000 because they opened up, and yet they were able to document not a single COVID case came from that gymnasium, despite the fact they kept open.
So
I think we've been sold a bill of goods. Now, once again, I got COVID, no doubt about it, February of 2020, before I knew what the devil was going on. And I treated it by staying at home, massive amounts of vitamins, what have you. I don't want to poo-poo this in any way, shape, or form. But I do think that this thing has been hammered into us, and I really resent it. It's been hammered into us by pseudoscientists like Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx to say that this is the way we need to behave. And for the government, for example, in California, thank God I'm gone, to say, oh, well, we didn't need masks because, as Gil Garcetti said, who's the mayor of Los Angeles, oh, well, I took my mask off and I held my breath while I was
right,
taking a photo with Magic Johnson. Now, how absurd was that?
I agree with you on that. But the question is, let's say you were in charge.
Mhm.
What would you have done when COVID first started?
You know what I would have done? I probably would have done exactly what was done by the administration. I probably would have done a lockdown to be able to find out exactly what we were dealing with. All right. I think then after that, I probably would have gone ahead and said, listen, this is what we know about this disease. All right. We're going to open things back up again, because the problem was, Malcolm, they kept open the large companies, the Walmarts, the Targets, the Costcos. They kept those guys all open, but the small business, which is the heart and soul of a lot of the American economy, they all shut down. That's baloney. They didn't even let people go to church, for crying out loud. But I probably would have about 6 months in said, okay, this is what we know. This is what we think is going to be safe. You guys are out of lockdown. Get the heck out. If you are not feeling well, these are the types of things you need to be able to do. I know that when I got this COVID, and it was horrendous, but treated it with huge amounts of vitamin D, with magnesium, with vitamin C, with zinc.
So
And I stayed in bed for about 2 to 3 weeks, and it was sobering. It was a horrific flu.
so do you think you're the average typical person?
I
With an
think that I'm
average
probably more of an
intellect?
average I think I am a more average typical person.
You
I
think
really
you-
do.
Okay, I don't. I think that
Yeah.
there are. In a way, I'm a classist. I think there are people. I think there are people that are.
No.
Well, I always forget. I always say Jefferson. I'm not sure, but what they said: the masses are the asses,
Oh,
and I agree with that.
no, I don't. And you
But
know what? I don't even more that I'm here in South Carolina. You know, I had my degree from the University of Southern California. I got my degree from Pepperdine University to get an MBA and all of those things. But in terms of moving back here to South Carolina, this is the heartland of the United States. They're not highly educated. Many of them are. And I'm not saying that education has any bearing upon anybody's character. But I have to tell you, these are hardworking individuals that are here. They're the heart and soul of America, and I've learned a lot from them. I'm not here to change where I live, South Carolina. I will always be a Californian, but I have to tell you, I have a brand new appreciation of just ordinary, common folks that are just trying the best they can to be able to keep their families fed, clothed, to be able to go to work, to be able to uphold American values. I mean, the number of American flags that we have around here, startling, unbelievable number of American flags. So I have a deep appreciation, and I think that's one of the lessons that I had learned from my California mentality to now the South Carolina appreciation of just common, ordinary people. And this is a fabulous country, and I don't want it to go to hell. I really don't, but I believe it's on its way.
Well, at least you kept the initials SC.
That's true.
But by the way, how's we were talking about the weather. How's the weather over there?
It's been very interesting. Once again, I'm a weather nut. And when we came across the country, the 2,400 miles, I had 2 or 3 weather apps that did keep us out of tornadoes. And we did have tornadoes, there was no doubt, and they are serious stuff. But there was a band of weather that came through Texas, up through Alabama, through Kansas, Nebraska, all the way on up. Fortunately, it passed north of us. However, we did get a tremendous amount of rain last night. So we got about almost 3 inches worth of rain here. But fortunately, as I say, what pushed it out of the way was the Gulf at a high pressure that pushed the very, very cold wave that hit the rest of the country north of us. So I bet some of your friends up in New York probably getting some pretty
Oh,
heavy
yeah,
duty
they're
snow.
freezing.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
with the snow and then they have ice storms coming. Now,
yeah.
one of the reasons I'm disappointed, actually in everybody,
Mm.
uh, right, left, in each country, why aren't we panicking about the weather changes? Why aren't we panicking that we're destroying the earth? Why
Well,
isn't why isn't this a major
I,
focus?
I think we are. I hope we're not panicking. I do think that something has been brought up that first and foremost that we probably need to go ahead and rekindle the oil and gas industry back here in the States. I understand that we are becoming overly dependent on OPEC, and unfortunately, I talked about this last week, overly dependent on, of all places, Russia. We have increased it from about 50 million barrels a day up to 240 million barrels a day of Russian oil. That's no way to be able to stay ahead as a leader of the free world. But I do think what was brought up a couple of days ago, I'm not really quite sure who brought it up, but I thought it was interesting. Nuclear power. What do you think about that? That literally, you don't have any heat warming effects on that. It's clean. It's understandable. I think that could be a way of going because once again, I'd love to do solar here. For example, I'd put solar panels if I could afford it onto my roof here. But once again, it's cloudy and there's a lot of clouds that come through in South Carolina, and then you don't get solar power. So
Well,
solar
they're talking
power,
about
wind power, it's just not reliable enough.
well,
Even Europe is saying it's not reliable enough. They've
they're
started to go
talking
back to
about
natural
doing
gas.
they're talking about doing solar farms.
Well, it's fine if you have sunlight.
Well, yeah, but in that part of Europe, but it could be brought into you. I don't know the typography of South Carolina. I can't say it, but
Mhm,
just in general, aside from oil, which you can not be dependent on Russian oil, but then
mhm.
again, if the planet is destroyed, it doesn't make a difference who's ruling the planet. But the question is, with everything that we know now, and that this, as you say, that the scientists say, it's not that we have a big window before the world
Well,
is destroyed. It's take it. They're talking about 2040. 2040 to me is a long time because I may not be around for another 40 years. But
yeah,
to
you're
my
right.
son, in 40 years, he's only going to be 65.
Mhm,
To his children, they're going to be kids. It's imminent. And
mhm.
none of us are doing anything. No country is really doing it. We're paying lip service to it.
Well,
And it's
I do know that who is paying lip service to it, obviously, is China. They're becoming
all of us.
remarkably dependent on coal. And unfortunately, we're becoming remarkably dependent back on coal because apparently we're stopping natural gas. Once again, this doesn't make any sense. The bottom line is if you have the United States with very strict green energy rules and regulations, and the rest of the world, and I mean China, I'm talking about Russia, and I'm talking about India. All of those people do not have those
Well,
standards.
I'm talking.
We're on one world.
I'm talking people in general. I'm not talking about the United States. I'm not talking about China. I'm not talking about Russia. We are destroying our planet.
Well, with the help of China, India, and Russia,
Okay,
yes,
so
you
so
are.
then so then we can't do anything.
Well, bottom line is, I think we are doing a tremendous amount, and unfortunately, we're starting to fall behind economically. We're starting to fall behind, and I don't think it's a good idea putting us into second and third position behind China and Russia. These are not
Well,
friendly companies.
but if they still continue doing the what they're doing and not doing anything about the changing the footprint, uh, we don't have to worry because the planet's going to be destroyed all over the world. The weather is different all over the
But you realize,
world. We have
but
climate
you
change.
realize, I understand that, but you cannot slit your own throat to say we've solved a COVID problem, for example, by slitting your own throat. The rest of the world survives. I don't want to see the United States going down on its knees And I keep starting to see this, and it really concerns me, just because we have this idea of trying to save the world. I want to make sure we save America first, so we can be the leaders that you want us to be. And why not? You didn't ask the question. How about nuclear power?
I don't know enough about nuclear power because it hasn't really been brought up. I think it should be. One of the things should be studied.
Mhm.
But the only thing I know when I think about nuclear power, I think, well, aside from accidents, but it's supposed to be, that's supposed to be taken care of now. But the nuclear waste, that's the question. I don't know what they could do with the nuclear waste, because the nuclear waste that we have from the previous things, we buried in the ocean. And that soon's going to be, I mean, we go do all our garbage in the ocean. Now we're suffering the effects of it. But anyway, I don't think we're going to solve the issues in this half hour.
Well,
But
did we reach any type of agreement? Because that's one of the reasons that we do talk from to the left to the right.
not really. I don't think
Well,
so.
you know what? I would submit that both the left and the right, that you and me, we're dissatisfied with the solutions that presently the American government is coming up with. I'm tired of the lip service. I want real solutions, and not just telling me and patting me on the head and patting me on the popo that everything is okay. It's not. Things need to be taken care of.
Right, and no one's doing it. Neither the left or the right.
Mhm.
It-
Well,
it-
I
it-
hope you've called your representative. I know we have called and screamed at our representatives. And in fact, I'm going to a campaign rally tomorrow, actually, yeah, tomorrow, to chat with some of our representatives. I think they need to hear more from ordinary people like you and me. And I say that to every one of the people who are listening out there. We need to become more involved locally. And because those politicians need to understand what our desires are and what our needs are, because they're growing.
I think they could care less.
Oh, then
I
it's
think
time
they could
for
care
you,
less.
young man, to run for Congress or
It-
for the Senate.
It depends who the campaign donors are and
Well,
what they say.
that will be a separate subject. But once again, I think we have enormous power, and I do think we need to start using it. Facebook got a good lesson. I'll tell you, Malcolm, they got a good lesson.
I say follow the dollar trail.
It's true.
Go to any of our senators or congressmen.
Mhm.
Find out who supports them and how much money they're getting for their campaign.
Mhm.
And probably 9 out of 10 things that come up in the Congress or be proposed, they vote in favor of these people who give them the campaign money. And
Well,
that's joking to death. But
we'll leave that for another discussion coming this next Friday. It was once again always delightful talking with you, Malcolm.
more.
All right.
I will see you next week.
My best to your family.
Send my love to
Bye-bye.
Fifth. Bye.